Hi all, this video is all about something that we call conflicts. We're going to be looking at conflicts between macroeconomic objectives and conflicts between macroeconomic policies. Now, when you think about a conflict, it's where two different people want very, very different things, or by achieving one thing, we can't achieve something else. So it's a clash, if you like. By achieving one thing, it might be affecting something else in a negative way. So first of all, conflicts between objectives. We've got the acronym DIGESTIVE, which we've looked at before, and this encompasses all of the different macroeconomic objectives. Economic development, which is about living standards. We've got inflation, when we can be demand pull or cost push. G is growth, so economic growth. We've got employment for E. Structure, we've been looking at different industries, different parts of the economy. We've got trade performance, inequality, and we've got fiscal performance. Policies, remember, could be monetary, fiscal, and now you should be fairly comfortable with supply side policies. Now, all these different things in the red circles here can show different conflicts that can exist in the economy. So I'm going to kick off first of all with conflicts between macroeconomic objectives. Now, this is probably the most classic one to remember, and we can show this through the Phillips curve, the conflict between inflation and unemployment. The logic is we want inflation to be 2%, we also want unemployment to be as low as possible. But the problem is, of course, that when unemployment is low, you tend to find, so unemployment will be low as we go down here towards zero, you tend to get really, really high inflation. So low unemployment can lead to really, really high inflation. The reason is because if people are employed, it tends to mean you've got lots of consumption taking place, which would fuel a growth in aggregate demand. But it also means that workers are very, very scarce, and that means firms that want to recruit more workers are finding it very difficult to find a good available supply of labour. So this will bid up wage rates across the economy, and that would increase business costs. So that really, really low unemployment is leading to really, really high inflation. But it often means that to bring down inflation, you've got to accept more unemployment will probably take place as well. Because to bring inflation down, you've got to reduce aggregate demand. And if demand starts to fall in the economy, it lowers the need for workers, which could create more unemployment to take place. So you've got the classic trade-off between the two. High inflation probably exists when you've got really low unemployment. So to bring down the inflation, it's probably going to mean that some people will start to lose their jobs. You can't necessarily achieve both of these things at the same time. Now, in a very, very similar way, growth and inflation are also two very, very difficult things to achieve at the same time. High rates of economic growth can lead to high inflation. Again, a growth in aggregate demand driven by more consumption, more investment, more exports, etc., is good for jobs, and GDP growing is a good thing. But if that's starting to create positive output gaps and scarcity, then inflation will result. So sometimes to bring down that rate of inflation, you've got to bring down aggregate demand in the economy. Now, growth and trade performance are also possibly things that will conflict with each other. We as a country want to reduce our trade deficit by promoting more exports, reducing our imports, but also we want the economy to grow. Now think about what growth means. You've got higher wage rates, you've got more consumption taking place. British people, by their very nature, have got a high marginal propensity to import. So if we were to receive additional or marginal incomes, a lot of us will go and spend that on foreign goods and services, and that could weaken our trade performance due to more importing taking place. Now we've also got to be aware that growth can create inflation, and if we've got a huge growth in our inflation rate and it's higher than the inflation rates overseas, then it means that the UK has lost international competitiveness. It means that our price levels are growing quicker than those abroad, and that could reduce the demand for our exports overseas and again worsen our trade performance. Another really classic one that people often remember is the conflict between growth and the environment. So you could think about this in terms of development or living standards. High rates of economic growth means you've got more factories producing output. You've got more cars on the road for people travelling to and from work. You've got more people demanding washing machines and TVs, fridge freezers, more people travelling in aeroplanes. All those things there are terrible for the environment. So it's possible there is a conflict between these two different things here. Now, when we look at conflicts between macroeconomic policies, we could think about what goes wrong when you use fiscal policy, monetary policy, and supply side policies. Now, first of all, think about fiscal policies. Right now in Britain, because of the coronavirus, the government is significantly increasing government spending to support better rates of economic growth and protect living standards and jobs today. Now, the problem is that what this is doing, it's linked to a huge growth in the government's national debt. So the government has to issue more and more bonds, and there was more debt, more loans taken out to prop up the economy in the short run. Now, this creates some longer term problems. We've got all this debt's been built up today so we can all carry on living our decent living standards, but this will mean in the future, to pay for this debt, we've got to have what we call fiscal austerity. So that will mean in the future government spending will probably have to fall, or taxes will need to increase to start paying down this debt. So that could mean less benefits are paid out. It could mean that the quality of public services starts to fall. So although it's good in the short run, some of these longer term implications are really problematic. We've also got to be aware that what this will create is something that we call an intergenerational equity problem. Now, all this means is we're transferring the problems that we're creating today onto people in the future. Now, you could think about that like the environmental one. The growth today will create bad environmental impacts for your kids and your grandkids. Well, all this debt that's been built up to prop up the economy now, it's probably going to be repaid by your kids and your grandkids. So we're getting the benefits of it, we're expecting somebody else to pick up the bill. Now, if in the future, to fund the debt and get the debt down, we've got to raise taxes, this could also reduce the incentive to work. So the idea will now be that because of higher tax rates, the incomes that people get after tax, their disposable income will start to fall, and some people might think, bugger this, and they may decide to reduce their supply of labour. So that could be really bad for future potential economic growth as well. Now, monetary policy can also create some problems. If we're in a period of high inflation, we start to raise interest rates to reduce the demand across the economy. Now, what this will do, though, it will mean that many homeowners are forced to pay much higher mortgage repayments because the cost of their debt has started to increase. Now, what this might do, it could plunge more and more homeowners into debt, struggle to make repayments, and again, that could mean that people start to lose their homes. If higher interest rates also, because of inflation, exist, this could be really bad for the competitiveness of our economy, because it means that small businesses are having to pay more to borrow money, and that could reduce the success of businesses as well. Now, supply side policies create some big problems. Now, remember, these are really important. They make the LRAS curve shift outwards, but if we're spending a fortune upgrading road networks and transport links, think about the environmental impacts of that. So again, that could be really bad for long-term sustainability if we're upgrading motorway networks and transport links by tearing down forests and woodland areas. Another big problem is the budget. Remember, to fund these different supply side policies requires potentially lots of government money. Well, these could mean that in the future, taxes need to increase to pay down that debt. So guys, you've got there conflicts between macroeconomic policies and objectives. Thank you very much.